Welcome to the Explainer. You know, in the sprawling, hyper-militarized galaxy of the 41st millennium, you'd think the most terrifying threats are massive alien armadas or planet-shattering weapons, right? Well, actually, sometimes the most devastating enemy is microscopic, and it doesn't just target the flesh, it targets the conscious mind. Today, we're going to dive into these afflictions not just as biological hazards, but as deeply personal, really dark stories of psychological terror. So, what's worse than your body turning into a literal monster? It's being fully awake to watch it happen. The true horror of the universe we're examining today isn't just the physical mutation itself. It's the inescapable trap of human awareness. It's that awful realization that your mind remains entirely intact while your body is violently rewritten totally against your will. Chapter 1. When Your Mind Lies.
Okay, picture this. Humanity's vast ships travel through an alternate hellish dimension called the Warp, which, by the way, is populated by literal demons. The only thing keeping a crew alive in this totally hostile realm is a psychic barrier known as a Geller field. Now imagine you're working the graveyard shift near those massive generators, and you're targeted by a plague spawned by Nurgle, the god of disease. It's called the Geller pox. But here's the thing. It doesn't start with physical symptoms. It starts quietly, right in your mind. First, you get strange nightmares. Nothing overly dramatic, just enough to put you on edge. Then the workers start developing these kind of harmless superstitions. You know, rubbing protective symbols on the machinery, maybe knocking on the generator housing. But here's the absolute twist. Each of these little rituals quietly wears down the protective wards on the equipment. The disease literally uses your own caution against you. And then the voices start. Infected crew members will cheerfully open sealed panels and dismantle the ship's defenses, absolutely certain they're helping. They'll literally explain to you with a big smile how they're improving the equipment while they tear out the very thing keeping the demons at bay.
The metal flows like liquid around their skulls. By the time the physical mutations actually hit, we're talking boils, bloated stomachs, tentacles. It is way too late. The exhausted workers just rest their heads against the generator, and their flesh fuses with the warp-tainted steel. The most extreme cases swell into these things called nightmare hulks. We're talking towering 10 feet tall, weighing over a ton. And there's no cure. The only solution is to kill the infected and literally burn the affected decks to ash. Chapter 2. The Prison of Flesh. Let's consider the Thousand Suns Space Marines for a second. These are superhuman, psychically gifted warriors. Imagine you're standing right beside your brother in arms. He's mid-sentence, and suddenly his armor violently cracks. Skin splits as extra limbs literally punch through from the inside out. Eyes start multiplying across his face, and through it all, the Space Marine remains completely agonizingly conscious. The victim collapses into a chaos spawn, which is just a writhing mass of mutated meat with no mind left. And worse, this contagion, known as the flesh change, feeds on psychic energy. So the pure panic of seeing your brother mutate triggers a chain reaction of fear, and even more mutations rippling across the ranks. Now, the desperation to stop this horror led to a tragedy where the cure was, without a doubt, worse than the disease. The Thousand Suns' greatest sorcerer, Ahriman, cast this massive, super desperate counterspell, known as the Rubric. And, well, it worked. Technically, the mutations stopped. But the cost? Absolutely catastrophic. Every single Marine whose psychic power wasn't strong enough was instantly reduced to dust, their consciousness sealed forever inside their hollow armor. Ahriman saved his legion by essentially killing most of them. For the traitorous Iron Warriors, this betrayal of the flesh takes on a colder, much more mechanical form. It's called the Obliterator virus. This is a techno-organic infection that turns your body into a living weapons factory. At first, your rifle feels less like a tool and more like a heavy, comforting limb. Your aim improves unnaturally. But soon, the weapon just won't come off. Skin grows right over the trigger guard. Tendons fuse with the barrel. Your armor merges with your bone at the molecular level. And finally, you become a walking weapons platform. Your body literally generates ammunition between muscle fibers, and gun barrels fold straight out of your forearms. But the true horror isn't the weapons. It's that a fragment of awareness survives. Deep inside this lumbering fusion of muscle tissue and powdered steel, the trapped victim's mind just watches, helplessly. You're basically a prisoner looking through your own eyes, watching guns sprout from what used to be your hands. Chapter 3. Conscious Inside a Corpse. So, we all know the standard zombie trope, right? The body is animated, but the person is long gone.
Well, the walking pox throws that right out the window. It leaves the victim's mind fully intact. It traps them inside a rotting, shambling husk covered in horn-like growths. The person inside is weeping and screaming internally, entirely aware of the atrocities their own body is committing. Survivors call the beginning of this the groaner phase. Imagine feeling this unnatural cold and a constant hunger just crawling inside your mind. Then your mouth begins to move on its own. You don't want to speak, but you hear your own voice mumbling isolated words you didn't even choose. Words like hungry, cold. You might laugh or cry without meaning to. And when your body encounters someone else, it lunges, it claws, it bites, it feeds, and you are trapped behind your own eyes, forced to watch yourself do it. It's truly nightmarish. And this inescapable plague doesn't just spread through bites, it spreads through sound. Yeah, you heard that right. The ceaseless groaning of a poxwalker horde carries the curse on the air itself. If you hear it clearly, you're infected. Eventually, your face locks into a permanent grin of agony, and if you get injured, maggots burst from the wounds instead of blood. This plague is so insanely severe that the Inquisition, the Imperium's ruthless secret police, they had to create an entirely new division, the Ordo Sepulchrum, just to handle the walking dead who still have the living trapped inside. Chapter 4. The Immortal Phantom Hunger. Let's go back, way back. 60 million years ago, an ancient race of living metal beings called the Necrons destroyed a godlike entity known as Lindu Gor. As he died, he laid a curse upon them. Fast forward to the 41st millennium, and this curse, the flare virus, drives entire Necron civilizations to harvest the living. And looking to eternity? In 60 million years of trying, with science that can literally manipulate reality itself, no cure has ever been found. Not one. These were Landagor's dying words, burned into the mind of every Necron present. I am the hunger, I am the flare, and from this moment you shall be too. Infected Necrons develop this insatiable craving for organic flesh. But remember, they are entirely metal. They have no mouths to eat with, no stomachs to digest with, no nerves to feel anything at all. Yet the phantom sickness screams anyway. So they slaughter living creatures and skin them, draping warm gore over their metal frames in a desperate attempt to feel something. But it just falls through them. They are immortal machines driven entirely mad by a phantom sickness, forever starving for a meal they can never, ever digest. And the curse doesn't even stay confined to metal. When human researchers from the Adeptus Mechanicus recovered samples of this infected living metal, the horror crossed boundaries. Within weeks, these human researchers began mutilating themselves, literally cutting their own flesh. They caught a digital, mechanical curse simply by touching the metal. It's a disease of the mind and machine, crossing the boundary to rot organic life. Just absolutely terrifying. Chapter 5. Death is not the end. Okay, so every other disease we've discussed so far destroys the body, the mind, or both. Nurgle's rot, it destroys the soul. The chaos god Nurgle has spent 10,000 years crafting plagues, and he considers this one to be his absolute masterpiece. It combines the pain and rotting flesh of every existing disease, but it adds this horrifying mechanic that ensures your suffering doesn't end when your heart stops beating. As you physically waste away in the real world, as your eyes merge into one, as a literal horn sprouts from your forehead and madness sets in, something else is happening in the warp. In a dimension known as Nurgle's Garden, the exact moment you are infected, a parasitic seed sprouts on a rotting willow tree. As your physical body decays, this warp fruit gorges itself, feeding directly on your life force like a parasite in this morbid, cosmic ritual. And then comes the crushing realization. When you finally succumb to the disease and die, the last traces of your soul are sucked into that swollen fruit in the warp. Your mortal flesh bursts apart, and a plague-bearer demon crawls out. A bloated, rotting horror with gangly limbs and a single horn. That demon is what is left of you. Your soul is permanently bound to Nurgle's service for all of eternity, trapped in a rotting body that will never die. 1. That is the exact number of confirmed cases it takes for the Imperium to order exterminatus. If the Inquisition finds just one single case of Nurgle's rot on a planet, they don't try to quarantine it, they don't try to cure it, they sacrifice millions of innocent lives without even blinking and burn the entire planet to ash. That is how deeply they fear this soul-destroying masterpiece. But there is a cruel twist to Nurgle's rot. You see, the harder your soul fights the disease in life,
the fatter that fruit grows in the warp. Fighting back doesn't save you. It simply ensures that when you die, the plague-bearer demon you become will be vastly more powerful. So, if your own willpower is used to forge the chains of your eternal torment, what would you do? Would you give in to the rod immediately to lessen the demon's power? Or would you fight to the bitter end, knowing you're only sealing your own doom? Think about that next time you feel a chill.